everybody. This has been an amazing book, and I'm thanking you for motivating me to really just study this book down to every word, because we just came off of, all three of us just came off of a fantastic part one basic training that we did online. And I can't tell you how much of this was integrated into the teaching. So to be able to take our new therapists that are coming in and not only give them great basic EMDR training, but also integrating the polyvagal was just, I don't know, there was something special about it. So with that being said, we're doing phases 3 and 4 today. And it was funny because I thought, oh gosh, there's really, I mean, this is going to be easy. Like everything was phase 1 and 2. Well, I shouldn't have thought that. And that's why we're doing this. So we're going to go into our phase 3 and 4. Thinking about phase 3, now I just want to go over the triphasic model. We are trauma-informed therapists. And if you are trained in EMDR, we monitor our work according to the 8 phases. But if you're any other type of trauma therapist, you work with the triphasic model, which we refer to as the 3 stages. And that comes from Pierre Genet, and that's like late 1800s. That comes from Judith Herman and her trauma recovery, which everybody should read if you haven't read at some point. And so the 3 stages of trauma work, we did stage 1 up until now. Like we're almost done with the book and we've only done stage 1. And that's great because stage 1 is all about making sure our clients are secure enough to move forward into stage 2, which is the memory work. And the memory work is what people send their clients to us for. I get a ton of referrals that are like, my therapist said that I ran into some trauma and she didn't know what to do with it. So I needed to go get EMDR. And so there they are, ready to do the memory work. When you send your client to a higher level of care, if you ask them, what stage trauma work do you do? If you find somebody that does stage 2 trauma work, memory work in a higher level of care, just email it to me. There's very, very few organizations out there that do the memory work. And if they do, it's usually trauma-focused CBT, which is fine. You know, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So this is stage 2 that we're working on here with the polyvagal aspect. So you're assumed already that safety is the intervention. You're already assuming that your client can maintain dual attention. You're already assuming that they can shift and state shift if needed. And then what we're doing here is we're going to be monitoring them. We're going to be using our polyvagal tools to monitor where they're at and how, if they're leaving their window of tolerance or not. So let's get this party started. Okay, so phase 3 assessment. Feel, deal, heal. I love this mantra. It comes out of the 12-step rooms too. And so at the end of the day, it is about feeling. Phase 3 is about activating the feelings. So when we talk about our stage 2 trauma work, we can't desensitize anything unless it's activated. And so in our basic trainings, we actually call this access and activate. And that's all part of this particular aspect of assessment. I was very relieved to see that Rebecca Kase put a lot of the target sequence planning in phase 1, because that's what we do in our basic training. And that basically our phase 3 is really to just get the client activated. At the end of the day, you should be able to do a phase 3 in 5 minutes. And I know that goes against what maybe you learned, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, when we were doing our entire phase 3. But if you spend the whole session doing your phase 3 and then your client's activated and the session ends, that's not helpful. 90-minute sessions were basically created to incorporate this type of assessment, but we don't really do these assessments anymore. And so our assessments, like I said, is to activate the client, because if they're not activated, we don't have anything to work on. So we want the client, phase 3 is going to be so the client will feel, and then we move directly into phase 4 so that our client can heal. Comprehensive focus versus symptom focus. There are 2 different types of treatment plans that you can look at. And once again, this is coming from Rebecca. So she's going to talk about a comprehensive overall picture target plan, or a symptom trigger focused treatment plan. The comprehensive treatment plan utilizes the float backs and the affect bridges and the direct questioning to locate the target. You're going to be floating back and you're going to be looking for that earliest memory. This is going to be the treatment plan that's basically going to clear out a negative neural network. A negative neural network, which is going to be a positive belief, or I'm sorry, negative belief or cognition, which is literally the verbalization of what the client experienced, implicit potentially. So comprehensive treatment she talks about, and the comprehensive treatment plan is the recommended path. That is standard EMDR. So whenever possible, the comprehensive standard EMDR treatment plan is what we're looking at when people talk about EMDR. However, there are many times when the autonomic flexibility suggests a symptom-focused treatment approach. So grateful for this, because this is what we teach in our basic training. This is one of the reasons why I jumped on board with EMDR consulting, because I worked with a lot of complex trauma and my clients weren't ready to do a comprehensive treatment plan. And I needed options now. I didn't need them at an advanced training. I wanted to come out of my basic training knowing how to meet the client where they're at. So Rebecca Kase talks about symptom-focused treatment. Some analogies that she used for me was the comprehensive is the climate, and she said the symptom is the weather. Or she said with the comprehensive is the wound, and the symptom is just the sting, like sting of a bee. So in other words, we're just taking a piece of the comprehensive when we're doing symptom focused. So symptom focused treatment plans are typically time limited. We can do a symptom focused treatment plan in one session. That's another beautiful thing about it. It's focusing only on one prong at a time. The comprehensive standard protocol works with all three prongs. But when we do a symptom focused treatment plan, we're doing one prong at a time, and generally that one prong is going to be current or future. And we actually call that two-prong processing. So two-prong processing is going to be wonderful for a client that's complex and doesn't want to go into their history. You know, just because a therapist says that they should work on a traumatic memory doesn't mean that they want to. And so instead of asking for what's your worst memory, and that's where we're going to start because you said you wanted EMDR, instead, we look at what's going on for you today and where can we start effectively. So increasing that autonomic flexibility and titrating the activation is indicated by the neurophysiological capacity. So in other words, this whole book is teaching us about how to increase autonomic flexibility, how to titrate the activation, how we want to look at a target that's present day. We could look at a nightmare. We can look at a flashback. We can look at distress of an upcoming event. So we're looking at that present. We're looking at that future. While we're working on those, that's when your autonomic flexibility, your ability to state shift is actually going to strengthen. Symptom-focused treatment plans are typically time limited, focusing on only one prong at a time versus the three-pronged, which I think I just said. The symptom focus titrates the activation. So examples are, once again, targeting specific intrusions, flashbacks, nightmares, targeting distress. One of the key things here with the symptom focus is if you're doing polyvagal informed work, and we have talked about how we use the language green, yellow, red, and I'll use the appropriate language as well, but it just makes it easier. Our goal is to be in green. That's our ventral vagal co-regulation. We want to keep at least one foot there. And that's kind of our jobs as the therapist. We're going to be connecting with that client throughout the session, holding that foot in that green ventral co-regulated state. But then if they go into and are focusing on something that is distressing, something that they're not looking forward to, something that comes out of a nightmare or a flashback. So it's going to be present day. Focusing on the yellow, because you're going to be moving into a fight, flight, freeze, fawn, mobilized state. All of those can be desensitized with EMD. which is what Rebecca's going to be introducing here. So we literally can use EMDR to work with holding our client and building our client's green ventral vagal, and then also their sympathetic nervous system. We can go in. Sympathetic nervous system is basically an amygdala hijack. And at the end of the day, with our different tools, and I am going to go over EMD in detail today, EMD can be used to eye movement desensitization only. There's no R on there. There's no memory work. And a lot of our clients don't want memory work necessarily. They may think they have to have memory work, but that's not the case. At least that's what we're talking about here. So we can go in and desensitize anything that's activated in the yellow sympathetic zone. And then if our client goes into red, which is going to be a dorsal vagal shutdown, that's dissociation. And we already know we're not going to go in and do any bilateral when a client is dissociative. So it really gives us some language, and it also gives us opportunity. So the symptom focus has a lot of pluses to it. Comprehensive plans get to the heart of the wound, while the symptom just takes the sting out of the wound. And so that's a great way to look at it. Because, and if you look at it from like an IFS perspective, your comprehensive is going to get in there and it's going to work with that exile. And you all know that are doing IFS, you can't get to the exile till you work with the protectors, and the protectors are in the yellow. The protectors are the ones that are taking action, and then they're spontaneous and they're sometimes causing trouble. And so we need to go in and do a symptom-focused target sequencing plan to work with the protector parts before we go in and do standard EMDR with the exile. So I love it when these different orientations just kind of all make sense, right? Mm-hmm. Treatment plans should align with what is tolerable for the client's nervous system. So that, of course, is easier said than done. The whole concept behind phase 1 and 2 and all the work that we talked about doing up until this point, which we're on chapter 10, or chapter 9. So for the last 8 chapters, all we've been talking about is getting our client ready for this moment. We've been just doing that stage 1 trauma work, and stage 1 trauma work can last a really long time. We even looked at a mid at our last time we met, because we have clients that have dissociative disorders, and they're not going to be going into stage 2 at any time soon. So symptom focus from the treatment plan is the client may experience more autonomic flexibility. Their ability to access green and ventral vagal, all of that's going to increase, and it's going to make them stronger and more able to hold a dual attention and to shift, state shift, as we go in and desensitize very specific symptoms. So the idea is, and in the case that Rebecca Kase did in her book with Joseph, was basically she did EMD, and then she did EMD little r, we'll talk about that, and then she went in and did EMD big R. Literally, if you read it, it looks like working with protector, 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 exile. So just like I said, beautiful integration there. And doing treatment is like doing a puzzle. Like, we have to figure out the pieces. We're always, as therapists, listening for the patterns, listening for those negative cognitions and beliefs, listening for those parts that get fired up, and then thinking about what tool we can use. And so I will give you a heads up, though, as we move into these tools. Rebecca uses the word constricted. I wish we could all get on the same page, but it's never going to happen. Rebecca uses constricted. We at EMDR Consulting call it restricted, and Andrea's presentation this recently in Seattle called it contained. So we've got 3 different words all trying to say the same thing. And so it's going to get super confusing, but I have a visual, and you can't mess with visuals. So we'll figure that out when the time comes. So the whole idea here is the window of tolerance, right? The case of Joseph outlines the integration of the case conceptualization and the treatment plan. The case conceptualization is looking at that past, present connections and looking at the symptoms that are part of what the client is working on, and assessing. Like I said, in the case example, in order to keep Joseph in his window of tolerance, she had to start with EMD. And once again, when I'm teaching, I always say if there's an R on there, it means that there's memory work. But if there's no R, there's no memory work. And so that's very safe for our clients that have a lot of complex trauma. And then the other piece, there was, I always like to point this out because it's a great opportunity to, originally, and I think this is fascinating, in 1989, it was called EMD for a year or two. When Francine Shapiro did her dissertation, that's what started EMDR. So imagine PTSD became a diagnosis in 1985. They have all these soldiers that are coming back that need help, and they have no idea what to do. Francine gets cancer. Then she decides to go from literature to, I'm going to figure out how to make myself feel better. And, I remember when I was sitting at a table with A.J. Popke as he was illegally vaping at a conference. He was so funny, telling me how he lived with Francine at the time. And she did go and walk in the park every day as a way to try to calm herself down and experimenting with what she was doing with her eyes and the darting back and forth. And there's some really cool information out there on nature and how that can be calming. But anyway, I'm getting totally off track. So she wrote her dissertation for her work that she was doing in school, and it was EMD. And that's when EMDR took off like wildfire. And EMD was the original name. And it was only about desensitization and shifting visual imagery. So I just personally think that's super cool that we've come all the way around to full circle. And now EMD really is a tool that we promote. It's just so easy to use. And it's going to be wonderful for working with our polyvagal informed clients. So, okay, so let me get back on track here. So we've got the window of tolerance, and we are, like I said, Rebecca uses the 3 tools, and we're going to go into what those 3 tools look like in just a minute. We're looking at our, we call it the Super 7, and I did learn this from my HAP training. The Super 7 are going to be the 7 questions that you ask going into phase 4. This is polyvagal. This is polyvagal. It is making that connection with the brain and the body. So that's awesome, because at the end of the day, we're all about the brain. We've got the AIP, that adaptive information processing model. If you were trained by me, we've got our short little, it's the past present connection, it's the 20/80 rule, it's the natural healing process of the brain. And at the end of the day, polyvagal is your autonomic nervous system, which is your body. And we need the brain and the body to connect. And that's what phase 3 does. So I'm like, well, that's super cool. I didn't really think of it that way. I guess, to be honest with you, I didn't really know that. So that's a beautiful way for us to start integrating polyvagal into EMDR, because we're already doing it. We didn't even know it, or I didn't know it. So I won't speak for all of you. So here we have our 7 questions, and then Rebecca goes over each one and just talks a little bit about them being polyvagal informed. We look at image, but image is actually any sense, okay? And any sense can activate any part of our body. And we're also looking at what's the 20/80 rule, and that 20% is about today and 80% comes from the past. And a lot of that past is going to be implicit. So that body-brain connection is going to be really important, because our implicit memories are going to be stored in our body, and we need to bring them up to the brain to get language. And when you make that connection between an experience, limbic system, nonverbal, and prefrontal cortex verbal, right here, this connection, this is a big piece of the healing. This is name it to tame it. This is all kinds of things. This is befriending your parts. I mean, all the orientations right here. And the fact that I'm with you as a somebody who's going to represent an appropriate attachment between me and this. This is beautiful work that we're doing. And we haven't even gotten into phase 4. So we're going to start with the questions, and I have them at the top of the page. And then I'm just going to, I'm trying to stick to Rebecca's book. So I'm not going to go into like my basic training mode, hopefully. But so we start with, what image represents the worst part of the experience to you now? So one of the #1 reasons why the SUDS doesn't go down is because our target's too big. It says in Francine's book that we want a picture. It says on our trainings, we talk about a snapshot. We talk about taking your iPhone and snapping a picture of some sort in order for that to be our agreed upon target. And we do that in order to basically connect and activate the entire memory network. And so if we don't have that, and instead we're talking about, I always use this example, you ask the client, times when they felt powerless, and they say, when I was bullied in 8th grade. If we target being bullied in 8th grade, there's a really good chance that it's not going to work, because there's all kinds of things that happened when you were bullied in 8th grade. But if we say, what was the worst part? Well, the worst part was when I was getting beat up. Okay. Give me a snapshot of the worst moment. Well, the snapshot was when the teacher saw what was happening and walked away. Now, we would have never gotten that. But this particular client was abandoned by his mother. And so for him, what activated that memory and the body was the snapshot of the teacher walking away, not of the kid that was pummeling him. So I think that's a beautiful example of why that snapshot is really important, because that's the zinger, I think Rebecca calls it, the zinger that just lights everything up. And if you saw Inside Out 2, they did a beautiful job of doing that with the zingers. Every time Riley got triggered, it was like you could see it going. It was great. So with our question around an image that represents the worst part, that's super important. One thing I did fail to mention before we started the questions is this is scripted. And just like I say in the trainings, we don't mess with the script. This script does not get changed. Rebecca did flip something at the end, and we'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, this is in the order that it's in for a reason. And so, first of all, with our image, now you know why that's important. And for those that can't come up with an image, of course, we can go to other senses. We've got sound, smell, taste, texture, etc. Then our second question, what words go best with the experience that expresses your negative belief about yourself? So that's going to be putting language to the experience. A lot of times it's putting language to a really early, maybe possibly implicit experience. It's the client's narrative about themselves. And at the end of the day, depending on which autonomic state they're in, when we ask the questions, tell me what it's like for you when you're in sympathetic, what it's like for you when you're in the yellow or the red, or what it's like to live in this world when you're in the yellow, what it's like. It's part of the interview that we do when we're getting our clients ready to learn about polyvagal. It's the client's in a different space depending on where they are in their autonomic nervous system. They're going to have different cognitions coming up. They're going to have different language that's connected to the work that we're doing. And so when we've got Shapiro, who basically has defined how we want to put language to the belief, and that once we get that language, that's just supposed to ignite everything. And so finding that negative belief, that negative cognition can be a little tricky. She says that if you don't get it, that you can keep going and activate the emotions and the body sensations and then go back. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to get language for the entire neural network. The last part that I really liked was how when we're putting language to the negative belief and the negative cognition, that we're putting words to the implicit unconscious experience that's locked in the body. So the implicit unconscious experience that's locked in the body, it literally, that past-present connection is going to be pulled together by that negative cognition, negative belief. Now, this was in the book, so I just thought I'd honor it with a slide, because I can't really explain it. I got a video, it's really short. But at the end of the day, the connection between the central nervous system, which is going to be our brain, and the autonomic nervous system, which is going to be our body, that brain to body connection is really important. And why the afferent versus the efferents, like really, that really messed with my my reading skills. But the neurons that are moving from the brain to the body to the brain, the brain to the body to the brain, efferent and afferent. So like I said, I've got this 1-minute video to honor it, and then we're going to move on.
So the terms afferent and efferent are most commonly used with the nervous system. So when I'm cold, the message going from my skin to my brain telling me that I'm cold is the afferent message because it's going towards my brain. When I decide to put on a sweater, the message from my brain to my muscles is the efferent message because it is going away from my brain.
That's it. That's all I got, folks. I will tell you, though, how to remember afferent, and this isn't politically correct, but if you put the S's in there instead of the F's, it tells you which direction we're going when it talks about the brain, because you got to go this way if you're talking about ASS. That's all I got. All right, let's keep going. Some of this stuff is just over my head. Okay, so also, I want to throw in there before we continue to move through our questions, the trauma word or the trauma language that we use for what a memory is. And this is kind of really out of order here, but it was connected with the efferent and efferent because those two are connected. And at the end of the day, it's about moving nerves, the nerves that allow the client to be affected. And so the language BASK, B-A-S-K, I don't know if you've heard of it before, but it is something that needs to be kind of taught more because it's universal throughout, like especially the communities that are in the ISSTD. But it's behavior, affect, sensory, and knowledge. And at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about affect and we're talking about effect. And affect is going to be, let's see here, you know what, I'm not even going to read this. So you can read it, and if you get it, that's awesome. I put it in there so that I can refer to it later. So our question, next question is, what words go best with the experience that expresses your negative belief about yourself? I threw the Inside Out characters in here because it's just, they did such a fantastic job with how we can be identifying what it is that the client is experiencing. Experiencing a flood of emotions and sensations is as the autonomic nervous system explicitly expresses its story. And we talked about that before, in that it's story, it's state before story. We've always thought, oh, we got to tell our story. Well, no, we have to identify our state. And then once we identify our state, are we in red? Are we in yellow? Are we in green? That is going to determine what our story looks like. So that's the same thing that we're doing here. We want to just take into consideration that what our client tells us if they're in yellow and what they tell us if they're in red, or what they would tell us if they are in green, is very different. And that makes sense because red is dissociative. So if your client's dissociative, what they're going to share with you versus if they're in their sympathetic nervous system, yellow, if they're in yellow, they can't access their prefrontal cortex. And if they're in green, they can't. So there's just like some components here that are all kind of making sense around why there's so much polyvagal in our phase 3 assessment. When you bring up the experience, what would you prefer to believe for yourself now? When we're doing the negative belief, we're doing a child experience. So I'm going to say to my client, what is it about your experience as a child that this is saying about you now? So if the client says that I'm not good enough because they were told they're not good enough over and over and over again, that's encoded in their system. That's encoded in everything they experience, and they're still experiencing I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough is going to be that negative cognition belief, and that's going to be in the past. But when we're looking for our positive, we want to ask the adult, what would you prefer for yourself now? What is the adult going to do, A, to take care of that younger part, and B, why are you here working with me now? So exploring that self state, and you're going to start, you see a lot of language in her book where she's saying, and curiosity, and then compassion and curiosity. And you're all like, for you that are in IFS, you're like, oh my gosh, core self, core self, core self. At the end of the day, anybody can do parts work to say that it's about the adult self. It's about the self now. What would you prefer to believe about yourself now? Or what would you prefer for yourself now? What is the desired state? And then the fourth question, when you think of the memory, how true do the words, and you repeat the cognition, feel to you now on a scale of 1 to 7, where 1 feels completely false and 7 feels completely true. Our VOC, our VOC, validity of cognition, invites an opportunity to make the implicit explicit. I love that. Implicit explicit by taking a baseline measurement. Every time you ask for a number, your client has to go from the limbic system into the prefrontal cortex, grab that number and pull it back and report it to you. That is present time orientation. That is all about safety cues that, Rebecca Kase talks about. That is a great way to like kind of ground your client without them really knowing about it. And maybe, obviously we do this a lot in the work that we're doing. And I don't know that we know that we're doing one of the 3 EMDR action mechanisms, because our 3 EMDR action mechanisms, one is orienting response. And we are orienting every time we get a number to measure something. When the client reports that the VOC is very low and highly unbelievable, then that just tells us, how far we are from the ventral vagal. We just have a lot of work to do. Higher VOC will indicate that we have good autonomic resiliency and flexibility. We have strong adaptive neural networks. Now, that doesn't mean that the client's connected to their body and that you're not going to run into something at some point, but in that moment, the client is very much connected to their prefrontal cortex. When you think of the memory and the words repeating the negative cognition, what emotions do you feel now? The emotions are the feeling. They're the narrative. They're the story that automatically gets told about the memory when it gets activated. So that's why, once again, state, story. What state are you in? What polyvagal state are you in? Sympathetic, dorsal vagal shutdown. And once again, your narrative is going to be not only different because it's stored with what state you're in, but also giving that language to that narrative is going to be part of the emotions, right? That emotions is what's going to activate it. Name it to tame us tells us about the neurobiological neutralizing that goes on. We literally have, and there's the videos in here, we're going to watch it briefly, but that Daniel Siegel tells us about how there's neurochemicals, that's not what neurotransmitters that are literally squirted onto the amygdala to calm it down. I love it when he does that, because I'm just like, okay, somebody's doing something and all we have to do is name it. So naming it is kind of a big deal in our work. And once again, that's that implicit connected to explicit. So then 6, where do you feel it in your body? So this is where Rebecca switched things around. She doesn't do the SUDS until you've done the body scan. So I don't know how that works. I know that because we're basic trainers and that we're told how we have to teach the training, we can't just go in and say, well, Rebecca Kase says this, and it sounds like she's right. But at the end of the day, we do the SUDS and then we do the body scan. But since we're representing her book, I'm going to do it the way that she recommends it. So she points out that she has switched this question with the final question because 80% of the nervous system is afferent, which means it goes from the body up to the brain. Afferent is sending signals from the body to the brain. Therefore, the body must be included in the explicit scaling of the internal experience. Makes sense? Right? Makes total sense. The body isn't an afterthought. It is a primary focus of the intervention and healing. So when you ask, where do you feel it in your body? The client names and identifies that somatic experience, which is inseparable from the autonomic defense response. So that makes total sense, right? We've got our body going to our brain. This is the whole point of integrating polyvagal to begin with. We have to have our brain and our body connected. Once again, the nervous system consists of the autonomic nervous system, which is the body, and the central nervous system, which is the brain. And these they're connected. They're connected on the right side. We're told left brain language, right brain experience, connected to the body. So just makes sense. But we're going to still keep it the way we need to keep it, but just knowing this. On the scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is no disturbance, neutral, and 10 is the greatest disturbance you can imagine, how disturbing does it feel now? The final question of the assessment, because it must include the body sensations along with other components. So, I think that you're totally understanding what we're talking about there. So just to summarize this phase 3, phase 3 should be relatively brief. We're really looking at when you're good at it. And I don't mean good, that's the wrong word, but when you're efficient, when you really get what we're doing here, which is activating the client, we want to do it quickly. And the part that's going to activate them is literally going to be the emotions. So we like to do it in 5 to 10 minutes. When we do, that doesn't matter. Limit our process-oriented questions and stay focused on the intention of the script, stimulating the memory and the autonomic response. So this isn't a talk therapy session. Phase 3, and I understand that we got taught differently. When I was at HAP, the HAP training, we literally, I spent a session on phase 3. I didn't get what we were doing. I thought we were going through the questions and that it was like, we're talking about it and I'm getting the answers, the appropriate answers. No, this is to access what it is that you agreed on, that you were going to target, and you activate it as fast as possible so that you can move into your phase 4.
Hey,
And then
Paula,
Rebecca, switch one question. Yeah,
we have a couple of questions, and I don't know if you want to pause
this
in
is a
little
perfect
while,
place,
or...
actually. I was just gonna
Okay,
ask right after this. So go ahead.
okay. So some feedback. People really are learning a lot, and you go really fast. So
Yeah, that's why we record it. So you can go listen to it again.
yeah. So a question is on like page 136, and it goes back to negative cognitions. So on page 136, it says that NC is about a specific memory and not an NC that relates to an entire life.
The negative. Okay, so it's a specific memory that's activating a neural network that's been it's encoded your entire life. So if I was told as a kid in the memory that my client is bringing up, so let's say it's, raging dad, alcoholic, screaming at me and said that I'm worthless, no good, and to go to my room, that neural network plays out into our entire life. That was what I meant to say. So, but yes, you're right. The negative cognition at that point is I am worthless, and it came from a childhood experience. Does that clarify that?
If the person who asked the question wants to like say something either out loud or in the chat, that'd be great. And then
Hi, that was me.
hi.
My name's Denise. So Paula you didn't say anything that was confusing to me. It was just in the book. It was confusing on page 136 because I was thinking the negative cognition, like if we were doing a memory, the negative cognition would be something that's really affecting their life then and now, right?
Yes,
so
then and now, past, present connection. Yep.
So I'm wondering if on page 136, she's just talking about if you're doing EMD with just a symptom, that you would only be targeting a negative cognition that is affecting you now. So I was just a little confused on that. And maybe it's something.
No, I like what you're saying, because at the end of the day, 20/80 rule tells us 20% is about today, 80% comes from the past. So if I am worthless today with what I use with EMD, it's going to be connected through that channel of association to I am worthless, because that's what I was told my whole life by my father. So, but with EMD, we're only going to target today.
Right. I think maybe that's the difference, is she's talking about only maybe a symptom, but maybe I think you're right. Again, yep. I was a little confused. I was like, wait, every negative cognition, I'm confused, but
yeah,
I'll look back.
They're all connected to something. We do know that. The whole point is for us to go in and to rewrite that coding that the client's got. And if you think about it from a parts perspective, it's that exile that got treated that way. And we're trying to get to it to heal it. And so, but it's all connected. But to your point, we're using the cognition to assess the symptom that's today.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, thanks, Paula and Denise. So there's one more question, and this goes back to Dan Siegel and the amygdala. So can you repeat the idea of Dan Siegel's, the chemical being sprayed on
I
the
have the
amygdala
video.
to calm it
So
down?
the video will pop up in just a few minutes. So is it okay if we wait for the video of Daniel Siegel explaining it himself?
Yeah, that sounds perfect. And that's
Okay.
it for questions. So
Sweet. All right. So yes, let's keep going. And yes, you guys, I know I talk fast. And at the end of the day, we want to get these. I think we've been doing this book thing for what, 8 months now. We want to make it doable, and you're only going to pick up 20% of what I say anyway. So literally, the more I talk, the more you'll learn. But I understand. Just listen. I'm a math girl, right? I'm all about statistics. Listen to it again, and just know that I'm just getting a lot done. So yeah, it's kind of how I roll. All right, we're moving into chapter 10. And like I said, Daniel Siegel's video is going to be here. So that we'll reference that when we get there. And so we're moving into our phase 4. So think about this. We just did our phase 3, which basically I've always AIP model, adaptive information processing of the brain, right? We're in the brain, we're working with the brain, and now it's the polyvagal informed is telling us, well, of course we're working with the body too. We've got this body brain connection that's going on all the time, which is why those words afferent and efferent are really important. And I did spend some time trying to understand them, but I just didn't feel good enough to teach it. So here we are with our phase 4 going in. It's called desensitization, even though it is desensitization and reprocessing. It's named desensitization because that's what EMDR was originally called, which was EMD, and they just never changed it. And so, yes, we do desensitize, but desensitizing and reprocessing memories are two different things. You may need one for the other, but they are two different things. Okay, so I'm just going to read some of these and then explain them. I just took quotes out of her book. I didn't want to reword what she was saying. So, by trusting the nervous system's innate capacity to heal, staying curious and relying on your own ventral surface. I love that. That's like, make sure that your core self is there and that all of your other parts are softening back and off to the side, and trust your nervous system, because at the end of the day, our parts are, what comes up for us is going to be activated by our client. And we're there in a capacity of holding them and securing them. So we want to make sure that we're paying attention to where we're coming from. And so staying curious, we see that word curious a lot throughout her book. Autonomic flexibility, which is that ability to state shift and that ability to move from green to yellow to green to yellow to red to yellow to green. And learning to navigate your internal world is the most important tool of the intervention. So yeah, because the client's going to leave and then they're going to be able to assess what it is that they're experiencing. Oh my God, I yelled at the kids again. I was in my yellow. I'm going to talk to my therapist about that. I come to the therapist. I say I was in yellow. The kids refuse to clean up. And then the therapist is like, well, let's use EMD to desensitize that. We do the EMD, the client goes back and the kids do the same thing. And they're not in their sympathetic anymore. So this is great work that we can do without going into the past. That's one of the things I love about it. The objective is to desensitize the targeted that's agreed upon, and that is neutralizing the amygdala. Basically, that's what we're talking about. So the amygdala gets activated, and the fire alarm goes off, and we need to put that fire alarm off, put the fire out. So the fire alarm goes off so that we can stay in dual attention. Phase 4 metabolizes the memory through the central and autonomic nervous system. So once again, that central nervous system, I wish they'd just say it, brain, autonomic nervous system, polyvagal, body. So both of them. And the reassessment of the experience by means of neuroception. And neuroception, not sure you're going to remember this, but it's one of the 3 principles of polyvagal. And we're going to be really going into polyvagal in more detail with Seth and Stephen's book, the next book study that we're going to do, because this is something I think will fill in a lot of the blanks. Rebecca's language threw me off a lot because she used the same words over and over again. And a lot of the words correlate with what we use in our basic training, but it's taking me a while to make those connections. So like autonomic flexibility, right? Like state shift. state shift. Like, so, and then when they talk about the vagal brake, heart rate, I'm like, why can't we just say that? But it's okay. It's all good. So the autonomic states of fight, flight, freeze, collapse, and the client experiences the memory from the safe and secure space. So we want 1 foot in ventral, and we want 1 foot in these other experiences. And yellow is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, increased heart rate. And it is an amygdala hijack, that if we can bring that amygdala to a neutral space, then the heart rate will come down and the client will enter back into green. And then if the client goes into red, which is a low heart rate, we need to increase their heart rate. And so there's all kinds of things that we can do. And Rebecca's got some pointers, but we do need to move along. So want to set the client up with instructions explaining EMDR is EMDR is a right brain psychotherapy, and it is right brain to right brain. We are not about talking. We just, like I said, came off of basic training. I think we said this 100 times. We said, when you are the talk therapist, you are directing the healing. But when you're doing EMDR, the brain is the healer. And we need to take a step back and let the brain do what it does. And so that's why it's a right brain psychotherapy. When we are utilizing EMDR, the brain is the natural healer. I think I just said that. And the therapist stays out of the way. Explain to the client to give us a title of their chapter and use their stop signal. So yes, make sure the stop signal is defined and that they understand how to use it at any point in time. They can stop. And I'd rather have a title of a chapter instead of the whole chapter. And that's a whole conversation, and we're not going to go into that now, but we need the clients to say as little as possible, and we need to do it in a politically correct way with them. And like I said, that's like a consult call talk. So a client always has the authority to stop and discuss if needed. And that's true. If they say, no, I got to talk about this, then of course we're going to stop. And then I love this acronym. Of course I love it. And we want to validate, and we validate with the word hugs. I hear you, I understand you, I get you, I see you. I can't believe I do get it, but parents ask me, I don't really understand this validating thing. All I want to do is fix it. I'm like, yes, we don't want to fix it. That's not what we're supposed to do. We want to validate. And they're like, well, how do I validate exactly? I'm like, okay, this is how you do it. You hear it, you understand it, you get it, you see it. That is hugging your client. That is hugging your child is basically what I say, because I work with a lot of parents. So, and Gabermonte said, we need to connect, belong, be loved by, and love. And then how? By giving all of our parts hugs. And so this is the whole premise of ego state therapy and structural dissociation and IFS. It's about honoring your parts. Dick Schwartz, no bad parts. Love all your parts. So I hear you. I understand you. I get you. I see you. So Rebecca Kase did EMD, and she doesn't go into details on how to do EMD. And you guys, I'm going to go through this quickly, but it's here. So you can take your video and you can go in and say, oh, we were 1 hour and 20 minutes in, and oh my gosh, she's got so much more to present. And this is where the slides are. I have it written out on the slides. It's also in the 8-phase starter packet. But I'm just going to tell you the difference between these. And I'm going to do it, first of all, by showing you the visual, because it's the easiest way to teach it. When we are working with EMDR, which is unrestricted, and a lot of you are very good at EMDR, it's the standard protocol, we take the entire neural network. So let's say that belief system is I am worthless, and we take it and none of it's contained. It is free association of all the memories, implicit, in utero, in another life, it doesn't matter. And we are looking to link, bind, or connect it to that positive cognition belief, which is the upside down triangle. We use these in our training for neural networks. And there's no rules here. It's just what do you notice? Go with that. What do you notice? Go with that. And you go deeper, deeper, deeper into the weeds of the memories. I hear you. And that is unrestricted. Then let's go over to EMD. And this is what Rebecca started with. When we do EMD, we contain the entire neural network. So all the memories are in here. No memory work here. EMD, no memory. I need to take that front off though. And we take our target out of the neural network, and we're only working with the target. And if you want to go back and see how Rebecca worked with Joseph with EMD, this is what she did. She took his target and she desensitized it, and then link binder connected it with the positive belief cognition. The middle is contained processing, and this is where the language is going to get goofy, because at the conference they called EMD little r restricted, and they called EMD contained, and then we've got Rebecca Kase who calls it constricted. Word show, sorry. And we're just going to call it EMDR, EMD little r for contained, and EMD, because it's just going to get more and more confusing. And then, of course, there's EMDR 2.0, which is just a superpower that we've got. And if you don't know what that is, go onto Facebook in the EMDR 2.0 Facebook group. I just posted, Adijan just put out a 6-credit recording of EMDR 2.0. I haven't watched it yet. I can't necessarily recommend it. Anything he does, I think right now we're globbing onto, but they just put it out there, and or at least I just found it, and I put it in the Facebook group. So when we're doing EMD, I'll go back to this slide. The key here is that we're fractionating the memory, and we're looking to desensitize only. I call it whack-a-mole, because once you desensitize one piece, another piece pops up, and you just make a decision on what you want that to look like. EMD little r, the contained, is for processing, memory processing of current targets, and it keeps the memories within the vicinity of the target. It's very powerful. And then EMDR, of course, is what we all work with and we all know. And then EMDR 2.0 desensitizes and provides stabilization without any new memory retrieval-ish. So let's look at this. So once again, that EMD little r is going to be containing the 80%. Remember, we talk about 20/80. And we're only taking out the memories that are associated with the target. So if I'm targeting, you know, like the fireworks and how loud they're going to be, and I take that out of the container, I'm going to be only working with probably other fireworks, loud noises, gunshots, anything that has to do with what's going on in my world, you know, recently. And anything that happened here is not going to be part of the work. And that's what EMD little r is. Super powerful. Just now, you know, being introduced into the basic trainings. It's all in the 8-phase starter packet. Here's the script for EMD. And like I said, no memory reprocessing, very short sets. Always take it back to target. Never ask, what do you notice now? If you want to learn it, go to the script. If you want more information, you know, call, look at the EMDR Chicago coaches, get onto a call with one of them. We do groups for reasonable prices. Get in and learn your EMD. It's amazing. And then EMD little r contained processing, the client and the clinician manage the activation. You're only focusing on one target. And how do you do that? Is you're doing longer sets of bilateral, but you're always bringing the client back to the original target. So I'm here at the target, and instead of doing, what do you notice, go with that, 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 which takes me in deep into the memories, it's, what do you notice, go with that, go back to the target, what do you notice, go with that, go back to the target, what do you notice, go with that, go back to the target. And we don't get down into that 80%, those implicit memories. And that's really helpful for a lot of our clients. It's basically all I used during the pandemic. And then EMDR 2.0, I can't say enough great things about what we can do with working memory. Like I said, we have a Facebook group that's got WeMind, and I'm always posting stuff about working memory and 2.0. A lot of great research out there. I'm trying to pull it all together with everything else that I'm trying to do. But it motivates the client. Is the client motivated? Activate the client, desensitize the disturbance with distractions. And here's a list of the distractions you can use. Complex tapping, 2, 1, 2, 1. Saying tick, tick, tock, and your client saying tock, tock, tick. I'm just pulling these from Adijan. Counting forwards, counting backwards. There's on my EMDRchicago.com resources EMDR, the research is at the bottom about if you pull numbers, that's going to be your most effective way to reduce a SUDS. So you're pulling numbers and you're doing the bilateral. So it's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Breath in, exhale out, or 20, 18, 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2, 0. It's whatever the client likes to do. You can have them spell, you can have them spell swear words. My adolescents like to say the swear words. It doesn't matter as long as you're distracting them. I use musical instruments or something that's got a noise when I'm working with like gunshots or fireworks, so that I can be really working with that particular sense. But the more taxation, the faster the SUDS goes down. Is basically, that's a general rule. And one of the things I absolutely love about these tools is we have choices. So once again, Rebecca did EMD, she did EMD little r, she did EMDR, and we like to slide in and out. We like to start a session maybe with EMDR, then we move into EMD little r, and then we end with EMD because we want our clients to go away with a SUDS that's lower than if we had done standard protocol. So all of these are modifications, and that's basically what her book is about, is modifications. She says it's one of our first slides, that standard protocol is not necessarily appropriate for our complex clients. Hence, we need to learn polyvagal, and we need to know what tools we can use. And then this is a cheat sheet. There's a cheat sheet. Laura can put it out in the chat, or it's in the 8-phase starter packet. It's a cheat sheet for all 3 tools if you're ready to get going with this. As you know, your phases 3, 5, 6, and 7 are all going to be the same, but we've got shifts in our phase 4. And just know that with EMD, we don't do a body scan because we're really trying to just stay with the symptom. And a lot of times the reason why we're staying with the symptom is because our client's not ready to engage the body. So EMD is just super easy to use. Okay, I think I love these little guys. So, all right, we've got one more section we're going to go through here, which is important for phase 4. So it's going to be what we're doing as therapists, right? We just talked about like the tools that we can use in our phase 4. But now it's like, what is it that we can be utilized that's polyvagal informed that can help our clients? And basically, these are like cognitive interweaves or clinical interventions. You know, we do a whole section of this on the training. And so, you know, she's just using different language for it. So we want to be noticing the nonverbal communication. We want to be recognizing that when our clients are pausing or if there's facial expressions, the ear turn. I had a client whose ear turns red. It turns out her dad used to drag her around by her ear. Like there are these tells, nonverbal tells. 85% is communication is nonverbal. So we're really going to be working on that. Asking the client to notice, name, and connect to the present. That's going to be our present time orientation, which is one of the 3 action mechanisms of EMDR. Breathing is an option. I have to admit, I don't do this, but asking the client if they'd like to breathe, or saying if you would like to breathe or when you would like to breathe, take an inhale in. That's something completely new to me. Longer exhales engage the vagal brake. So I always say, take a breath in and longer exhale out. Our 2 responsibilities is to remain connected in a co-regulation way and to track their process. And we are tracking integration and the autonomic arousal. Checking in with the original experience as opposed to the image and the negative belief. It looks like I have a typo there. This gets really confusing in the trainings. Are we looking at the image? Are we looking at the issue? Are we looking, are we looking at the worst part? Like, what are we looking at? And Rebecca, I'm just putting Rebecca's language up here because I got to be honest, I don't have the exact answer. I know what we start with, which is an image. And I know I like to end with the image because it's changed so much, but checking in with the original experience as opposed to the image. So that would mean in my example that we're going to check in with the image. We're not checking in with the image of the teacher turning and walking away, but I am going into the worst part, which was when the client said they were getting beat up. So that would be, and then the original experience would be getting bullied in 8th grade. So I will be completely transparent. I'm not sure what she means there. So image and negative belief are the only components of the experience. And then when she says that, then I'm like, oh, image. I got the image piece. So I'm just saying it's confusing, and it's really confusing to teach too. Clients can return to what is most relevant to them. We're looking for the energy. That's parts work. Parts work is energy. Where's the energy? What part wants attention today? What energy is forward? Who's driving the bus? Checking the SUDS focuses the work on the remaining disturbance and distress. So if you're pulling up, what it was that you agreed on, your target, it's only going to come up with the distress that's left. And that's what the SUDS is for, which is great. And then what do you notice now? It's an opportunity to name, notice, and make what's implicit explicit. So once again, love that connection with the nonverbal and the verbal. As the target becomes desensitized, the client will experience a shift in aspect of memory that no longer serves them, which is true. There are going to be aspects of the memory that will I forget the language for it. There's a word that they use where it's like leaves on a tree that fall off. Information that you don't need anymore because you're a grown-up now. There's a lot of things that you can do to take care of yourself. The goal is to see the experience from the perspective of the adult as opposed to the inner child. And now, once we've desensitized it, if you with EMD, for example, the image is hard or impossible to retrieve. And what a gift that is. You got a client that had a nightmare with a perpetrator. You focus on that image. It's a SUDS of a 10. You get the SUDS down to a 1, and you get the image so that they can't see it anymore. And you didn't have to do any memory work. I think that's phenomenal. New insights and meanings making occurs when maladaptive material held in the memory network starts to shift. So at the end of the day, we are starting with what's maladaptive, and our AIP, adaptive information processing model, is pulling it into a more adaptive memory so then it can be time-stamped and stored in the long-term memory and no longer an issue. And it is permanent. It is a trait change. It is new encoding of the brain. So yay. And the change in the autonomic response assists the client in this new memory that is connected to ventral. So once again, just putting polyvagal language in, maybe something you already knew, but maybe not, because this is a lot of information that comes from, the basic trainings, and the basic trainings is like a fire hose. So this section blew me away, and I was very sarcastic here. There's a whole section on don't leave the room. And it's got therapists on their phones and therapists making their grocery lists and therapists doing this, therapists doing that. I wasn't even going to honor what it is that was said, because I'm like, I don't know any therapists like that, but hopefully I'm not insulting anybody. What a gift and an honor to be part of our client's journey and to be present for it. And then we are shifting from a doer to the observer. And so a lot of times we feel like with the scripts that we have this role. And at the end of the day, we're holding the client. We are there to observe and to witness and to provide an appropriate attachment. The natural healing process of the brain is doing amazing work. And we are there to just co-regulate and track. And I love that, because that gives us a little bit of a break, don't you think? And then we move out of our left brain intellectual self into our right brain of presence. Speaking of presence, cues of presence. And these are examples of cues of presence that she put in there. Using audible or attuned breath. I've never thought of this. So breathing so that they can hear you, but not necessarily asking them to breathe. I'm a loud breather because I do it all the time in my trainings. I'm like, inhale in, exhale out. So I could probably do that with some volume. Body language. What is our body language looking like? And I have a video on attunement that we watched last time when we talked about body language, and I'd love to play it, but I'm looking at the clock. So we're not going to play that, but we will do the other video that I said we'd play. But using body language, tone of voice, our position that we're in, eye contact, facial expressions. So all of this is part of how we can hold our client. Using our voice to celebrate progress with enthusiasm and nonverbal communication. And so the present cues are pretty pretty obvious. Throughout desensitization, the autonomic and central nervous systems dance the dance of integration. And so we are doing this dance. We are doing this dance. And that's what I love about the tools, because you can be shifting in and out of EMD, EMD little r, EMD, add some EMDR 2.0. And you can be shifting it out and doing this dance and using our tools. So, you know, that's exactly what she's talking about when she says that we're tracking. Tracking the system entails tracking our client's neurophysiological state by assessing shifts. So are they shifting from green to yellow? Are they shifting from yellow to red? You know, I kind of had to wrap my brain around this, because this is literally asking the client, like, what are you noticing now? And so just send to Laura. I'm just going to give you a couple examples so that you can put these into your green, yellow, red. But green is the co-regulated. Yellow is the sympathetic fight, flight, freeze, fawn, mobilization. And red is dorsal. So I'm just going to put a couple examples out there. If the client says that their heart is racing, what state are we in? Green, yellow, red.
Right, we got some yellows, lots of yellows.
Okay, so heart is racing. Polyvagal is heart rate variability, the study of heart rate variability. And so if your heart is racing, you are in your sympathetic nervous system. It is impossible to be in a red dorsal vagal shutdown with a racing heart. Impossible. So that's helpful, right? Let's see here. Where are you if you say, I can't, no. Let's see here. I can't really see the image. It's gone. I feel calmer now. Green, yellow, red.
We got almost all greens.
Excellent. And then the last one is, I don't feel my body. I don't feel my body. I don't feel like I'm in my body. I feel like I'm outside of my body.
Yeah,
Sometimes
we've
I'm
got it.
observed.
Lots of reds.
Excellent. And in yellow, we can go in and neutralize that amygdala and bring the heart rate down. But in red, we need to bring the heart rate up, and we're not doing any bilateral, because bilateral brings up memories, and we don't want to bring up memories for anybody that's not in their body, which is basically polyvagal language. That's awesome. Tracking the client allows you to quickly select an intervention. So once again, we can move in and out of our tools. We can reorient the client by doing a 3-3-3. Let's do a 3-3-3 right now. Just look around the room and point at 3 rectangles and use your fingers so that we can see you doing it. And then look around the room and point at 3 things that are blue. And then we shake out 3 parts of our body, starting with the wrist. I like to do it up by the heart, rolling the shoulders, stretching out that neck. And then breath in and longer breath out. So we always can toggle into, pendulate into some type of present time orientation. Check-ins basically are focusing on the narrative, the scenes, the story. It doesn't really ask about feelings. So what Rebecca's suggesting is check in, ask about the feelings, ask about what the client is experiencing in their body. Make the question specific. She's got a couple questions that she gives in her book that I'll be touching on in just a minute. Anchoring is used to maintain connection to ventral. So teaching our clients how to anchor is important. And so one of the ways that we do it is with what's called secure your space. But that's what we do in the training. But what she does here is she uses language like, remember, you're in my office, wiggle your toes, feel your feet, feel your feet to the floor, take a moment, look around the room, feel the seat in the chair. I think we all, use some of these at this point anyway. These are quick, subtle reminders to direct your client to keep their awareness anchored in the present. And this is all about dual awareness. Present time orientation is one of the 3 action mechanisms of EMDR. I can't now, everything I read, I'm like, oh, well, no wonder it just makes so much more sense. And for my teaching, it's huge because when we talk about the 3 action mechanisms, one is REM, the second is working memory, and the third is the orienting response. I really don't have a whole lot to say about it. Now I got a whole book on it. So there's a lot there. So that's super cool. So she does a section on interweaves. I thought this was very clever because once again, I also teach a lot about interweaves, and it's a really hard section to teach. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I get what they are, and I've taken Dini Laliotis's interweaves twice, 3 times maybe, even got consultation from her. So I get it. It's just a really hard thing to teach. So it was nice to see Rebecca's her thoughts on how to teach this, because it really is all about polyvagal. So she's got a couple different sections here. This one's is whose narrative is that? So in other words, this is parts work. I love it when we see, like I said, other orientations. Whose narrative is that? You know, what part of you? Where's the most energy? Where is it stuck? What part of your nervous system does that story belong to? Because the autonomic nervous system response is stored with the memory. So that's great language. And what would the story look like if you were pulling it from ventral vagal green or from like core self, let's say? What polyvagal state is it? And this is just which state of your nervous system does the feeling, sensation, thought, experience belong to? And, you know, we're just throwing in that traffic light here once again, just because it's a great way to talk about polyvagal. One of the reasons why I'm using Seth and Stephen's book is because this is the first book that has come out with the traffic light colors, and they teach to it in the whole book. So that's why we're moving to that book. Movement. Is there a movement that feels right to you? What movements might help get with you being stuck? What can you do with your body now that you couldn't do then? The key to movement is curiosity and engaging the ventral vagal. Once again, or engaging the vagal brake. Once again, that curiosity comes in, and you know, all I think of is the 8 C's of IFS. Helping them put language to their different states. Here's an example of a tool that's on my website. This is the feelings chart. Basically, at any point in time, you can ask your clients to review the feelings when you're talking about your different states. And this is just an example of ways that we can do that. There's also another great chart that we showed earlier in the one of the other chapters. If you go to the Polyvagal resource page, there's also a video now, it's only 20 minutes, of me teaching how to use this traffic light worksheets. So I haven't, we'll see how that all correlates with Seth and Stephen's stuff as we move. We've only got 1 book study left, which is kind of crazy. Name it to tame it. Rebecca calls it name, notice and name. So what feelings or sensations are you aware of in the moment? We're inviting neuroception to investigate. What do you see around here that's dangerous? What are the cues? What do you see around here that's safe and secure? Really being able to use our anchors that we've worked on with our client, and then having them identify. And if they identify a danger cue, you can go in and do bilateral. And if you find a dorsal or a ventral vagal green, and they're really into it, we can also use bilateral. So she gives some examples, and I was working on this late last night, and I literally was like, this is amazing. But that's not what I said, but that's what it wrote. So that's cool. So here's our very short Name It to Tame It video with Daniel Siegel, and he literally talks about those neurotransmitters that are squirted onto that fiery amygdala. So let's do it.
There are studies that everybody should know about that I summarize with the phrase, name it to tame it. So if you're really agitated, you're frightened of being rejected again, or you're really upset with what happened, or you're angry or whatever, in Maria's right brain, I can tell you this, in addition to right and left, there's, now please excuse these incredibly simplistic statements, but there's an upstairs brain and a downstairs brain. Now, I'm fine with that for this parenting book, but believe me, my other foot is in science, and the scientists would see that and go, what? But the fact is, there's a cortical rim where a lot of this higher stuff goes on, and there's everything below the cortex. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your fingers and put your hands over the top, give this a try. This would be in my brain like this, see? And so this would be the cortex where you do all your thinking and planning and all that kind of stuff. If you lift up your cortex, you have everything below the cortex, which we call the downstairs brain. So that's reasonable. Downstairs is just a substitute for the word subcortical, which freaks parents out. So downstairs. And it's the upstairs brain is the cortex. Okay, so you lift up your upstairs brain, you go to your downstairs brain, that's the subcortex. It's the limbic area, and it's the brainstem. These are very ancient circuits responsible for things like emotion and motivation and fight, flight, freeze reaction and your arousal states, whether you're awake or asleep, stuff like that. So what happens at that moment is, if we did a scan on your brain, we would say that your right amygdala and your limbic area and your downstairs brain, the downstairs brain would be super active. I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared, I'm scared. And studies show that if you have this kind of presence and of mind, I can get Maria's left brain to name feeling from the downstairs brain. You can show that she will squirt soothing neurotransmitters down to her right limbic area, right downstairs brain, and calm it down.
There you have it from the scientist himself. So that's beautiful. Okay, I am going to make a mad dash to get the rest of the slides in so you guys can listen to them as you, because there's no way I'm going to be able to teach in 8 minutes. I don't think I have too many left, but I wanted to do this as a practicum, but maybe come back to it if you can. Notice a name. This comes from our chart that you can get off the website as well. And it's just basically bring to mind a happy, joyful memory. And then what do you notice? And we try to match it up with the green, yellow, or red. Think of something mildly disturbing, match it up with something green, yellow, or red. And then talking about how the autonomic nervous system gives us data as a nonverbal way to understand our memories. Super powerful. Scanning for cues, I kind of already referred to this, but take a moment and scan for any cues for safety. Notice yourself in this moment. Are there any cues, good spelling, of safety here? Are there any cues of danger? And so when we start our trainings now, ever since the pandemic, we do what's called secure your space. And secure your space is used to give the client cues of safety that we can refer them to anytime during the work. So if there's a script for it, it's very, very easy. It's basically asking the client, and I'm going to read the script right here of this particular adolescent I worked with during the pandemic. And, once again, this was in phase 2. We want to have these things done already. And so I, the therapist, said, what about your space makes you feel secure at this moment? Okay. And the client looks around the room. My bearded dragon named Lucy and my turtle named Sue. Love that name. Describe in detail for me. Use your senses. And I have my polyvagal emotions chart up here with the green. I can hear my turtle tank water filter humming in the background, and Soup is swimming around. I can take Lucy out of her cage and let her sit on my chest. Petting her feels really cool, and she's so calm. She just sits there looking around. And then I say, what are some feeling words from the green section that resonate with you? Feeling fine, mellow, content, satisfied. I use those mild words on purpose for the example. That's not what she said, because a lot of our clients are going to give you pushback on some of these words, but fine, content, okay, we can work with that. And then resource this secure space, if appropriate, with Laurel's slow, short taps to strengthen and enhance it. And then how secure do you feel from 1 to 5, where 5 is being secure and the client says 5. At any point in my EMDR session, I can say, can you look over at the turtle tank and tell me what Soup's doing? or can you go get Lucy and just put Lucy on your chest? At any point in time, I can pull my client into their cues of safety because I know what they are already. So Rebecca Case didn't have this, but this does come from Jim Knipe, and I just thought it was perfect. Wow, look at me, I did finish. So to summarize, in short, the interventions here, they're subtle, they're non-direct, they're invitational, they're focusing on embodied somatic processes. And I just took this quote from Rebecca. She says, I never left the room and I conveyed my presence with my body and my words. I used anchoring statements to help maintain dual awareness. The skills of tracking and cues of present keep you and your client tethered and maintain an open channel of connection and co-regulation. The use of anchoring and polyvagal inspired interweave supports the autonomic nervous system to maintain enough connection to ventral and to work through blocks effectively. So basically, I feel like phase 3, wow, is really my words, like wow. And phase 4, just a lot of what we're already teaching in our basic training with secure your space, which are the cues of safety. We show the videos of Name It to Tame It, and the other one that I had to skip over. We show those in our basic training about how this is a nonverbal right brain to right brain psychotherapy. And a lot of what we do is not going to require language. And then those extra tools, the EMD little r, the EMDR 2.0, just kind of supplemented in there what she didn't refer to and how to do them. And you can find, like I said, the scripts for those on emdrchicago.com resources under EMDR. So I hope this was worth your time. And like I said, I know I talk fast, but now you can go and listen to it all you want. And you've got everything that I was able to share with you in our chapters 9 and 10. And we only have one book study group left. So, wow. We're going to keep the time or the dates, first Monday of the month, but I do have to change the time to 9:30 to 11 because I'm doing my IFS course from 11 to 2. So we will see you all in a month. And if you have any questions or anything, you can stick around and we're going to be around for a couple minutes. And so thank you. Thank you for coming. Laura, do you have anything to add?
So the next book study is going to be on August 5th, and that one is still going to be at 10:30, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then for
Thank
the
you.
new book, we'll switch to 9:30.
You are absolutely right. That's right.
So 10:30, August 5th, chapters 11 through 14.
Yeah.
If you have any questions, feel free to stick around. If not, we have a good rest of your week, and we hope to see
have
you
a
in
great
August.
rest of your week.